Hello. Hello, everyone. I believe you can hear me now. Thank you for waiting for the beginning of this webinar on the topic of the preparation of XBRL white papers in compliance with the various applicable regulations and taxonomies um, required by MiCA, the Markets in Crypto Asset Regulation. My name is Juan Ibañez. I am the General Secretary of the MiCA Crypto Alliance, and I'm joined by Aayush Ladda, who is also a Senior Business Analyst at the MiCA Crypto Alliance as well. On today's webinar, we are going to be discussing best practices for MiCA white papers. As you know, the MiCA Crypto Alliance, I believe you might be familiar with us at this point, is an initiative for the assistance of the industry in complying with MiCA requirements. And in assisting with compliance with these requirements, we don't just try to do the bare minimum, but also try to take this above and beyond and try to help the industry promote best practices in the field. As we have gotten into the year of MiCA implementation, that's been 2025, rolling into the year of 2026, where much more stricter review of compliance documents for crypto asset white papers are going to be required. It's very important to look into these regulations specifically. We have been focused on the topic of MiCA white papers and MiCA sustainability data. As you know, we're sort of specialists on the matter, even though that's not the only areas where we work at. And we've been getting a lot of questions about XBRL white papers lately, because up until this point in the year, it was possible to prepare a MiCA white paper basically in a Google Doc, in a Microsoft Word document, and submit the document, exporting it as a PDF, submitting it as sometimes even as an email attachment to the national competent authority, and there would not be much more to do. Furthermore, many have noted that throughout this year, it has been possible to prepare white papers that do not follow entirely the requirements of the markets in crypto assets regulation, and specifically the regulatory technical standards, or the implementing technical standards. Most importantly, a regulation called Commission Implementing Regulation 2024/2984 and Commission Delegated Regulation 2025/422. So many have taken this to mean that, well, this is great news. We don't need to follow the regulation very carefully because the regulators are not paying attention. This is not exactly true. As we're going to see, some of these implementing technical standards have not really been in force up until this moment. And they will be in force from the 23rd of December of 2025, that is 12 days from now, so less than 2 weeks for compliance. And this also includes the XBRL white paper requirement. So let's dive into the applicable regulation. And before we do that, maybe, yes, we can put the agenda of this webinar on screen. What we are going to be covering today is the applicable regulation and the distinction between the prior ESMA proof of concept on XBRL for white papers and the current taxonomy, an exploration of the taxonomy of the ESMA provided tools to prepare white papers, the consultation that ESMA did to improve that tool and find errors with it, the errors that have been fixed, the errors that have not been fixed, and then different examples of white papers prepared in different ways, including the white papers prepared by ourselves at the MiCA Crypto Alliance and why we believe these are a best-in-class type of white paper. We are going to use this as an excuse to explore common errors in MiCA white papers, and then we're also going to show you something that is really important, which is to learn to validate a white paper yourselves, which is really important to understand if one has done the correct job. So as the next step, what I'm going to do is I'm going to start sharing my screen. Just allow a moment, please. And here we go, hopefully. So as you can see, I'm sharing here an excerpt of MiCA, that is Regulation 1114 of the year 2023. This excerpt will show up in multiple parts of the regulation, referring to different types of crypto assets, but it's always the same. The crypto asset white paper shall be made available in a machine-readable format. Now, there's multiple types of machine-readable formats. One of them is XBRL. XBRL stands for Extensive Business Reporting Language. But there could be others, right? Even a CSV file you could consider machine-readable. What happens is that then there is an implementing regulation, as I mentioned before, is the regulation 2984, which specifies that the machine readability of the white paper needs to be in the extensible business reporting language, and specifically using the inline XBRL instance of XBRL. So that's a specific machine readable language, which basically will mean that the normal content of the white paper will be surrounded by machine readable tags, identifying the content and parcellating it, or making it granularly processable by a machine. Therefore, you get both a human readable version of the white paper and a machine readable version of the white paper. As you can see actually on screen, the requirements of this implementing regulation include also Article 1 over there that mentions that the templates for crypto asset white papers are the ones that are attached as an annex to this implementing regulation. When we evaluate if a white paper has been correctly written or not correctly written, the standard in the industry is to refer to the templates in the implementing regulation 2984. That's where it says, you have this indicator with this name and number, and that needs to have this content, and the content needs to be in this particular format. You will find in the MiCA Crypto Alliance YouTube channel a video, for instance, evaluating a white paper field by field, and in helping you as a valuable resource understand when you need to write yes or no, or you need to write true or false. Yes or no, true or false are true binary or Boolean values if you want. So they could be the same, one or the other, but only one of these values is allowed by their regulation. In this case, in MiCA white papers, basically the rule is you never write yes or no, you always write true or false. That sort of error can happen very commonly in writing a white paper, and we are sort of specialists at identifying that, and it's a good practice to avoid them. Now, some have noted correctly that white papers that had, say, for instance, yes or no, rather than true or false throughout this year, have not been rejected by the NCAs. And some have, however, mistakenly taken that to mean that a white paper that does not say, that does not follow the implementing regulation is all right because the regulators are not reading or looking at it carefully. But if you see Article 4 here, what this regulation says is that this shall apply from the 23rd of December of 2025. So both rigorous usage of the templates provided in the implementing regulation, as well as XBRL, are coming into force on the 23rd of December, which means the bar for white paper is becoming much, much higher. Now, already at the second consultation package of ESMA, on the way to implementing this regulation with the implementing regulations precisely, ESMA had already noted that the cost of producing a white paper an annual financial statement in XBRL format could go up to 40,000 euros done in-house for a single document. Now, well, of course, that's an inflated figure. Please do not pay 40,000 euro for a single XBRL white paper conversion. We can help you with that. But obviously, it's an important matter to do this correctly, right? So let's dive also into that. Now, a few days ago, ESMA published this statement, which the numbering of the statement is much harder to remember by heart, but is a statement to support the smooth implementation of the MiCA standards and format requirements. And it establishes multiple requirements for white papers, notably reminding all of us that we need to have XBRL implementation by the 23rd of December of 2025. Notably also, this statement also reminds us that we need to be using legal entity identifiers and digital token identifiers. This is important and could be the subject of one of our next webinars as well, because there has been quite some debate on whether these are best practices but not required, or whether these are best practices and required. And the statement is starting to, at least in some cases, tilt the scale towards this is always required. This is also important because these tokens are part of taxonomy specifications for the XBRL implementation package of white papers. Anyway, long story short, what this all means is that we have less than 2 weeks to be ready to produce white papers in XBRL format. In case you are concerned about existing white papers that have already been submitted before the 23rd of December in a non-XBRL format, say as a PDF, we would be of the opinion that this is not required to have the white papers retroactively converted from PDF to XBRL. However, it is possible that some NCA interprets this otherwise. And it's also nevertheless the case that to modify the white papers, and you need to modify them regularly to keep them updated, the white papers need to be converted to XBRL format, because the new submission does need to be in XBRL format. So at best, what this means is that we have a less abrupt entry onto the 23rd of December, but in short, on the 23rd of December, the bar is raising. It's also important to note that ESMA has also indicated in the statement that any tools that they make available themselves to produce white papers are not themselves validated, and any errors emerging from the usage of this tool are not ESMA's responsibility. They are the responsibility of the user. We are going to show you this tool and the output that it produces. I can anticipate already it does have errors and problems. So please be careful in using this, and we're going to try to help you navigate that as well. As a final note on this, let me see if I can find this. Perfect. Something else I want to share is that this over here. Also in the second consultation package of ESMA, you can see that they had a MiCA white paper proof of concept for XBRL format for the white papers. Now, the link that you see on screen right now is no longer live. They have taken this link down to help people avoid confusion with the white papers. But we can still see some examples of some published white papers that follow the proof of concept, which is not the applicable XBRL taxonomy, but precisely a pilot, an ideation, a proof that this can be done for how to do the white papers. One of these examples, for instance, is the stable mint white paper that you see on screen right now. This white paper was done in an HTML format that follows the XBRL specification, and this is how it looks like. It has an ESMA logo because literally, and please don't put ESMA logos in non-ESMA documents. This is just that the template had the ESMA logo and it was literally copied. You can also see an example, perhaps a bit more nicely designed, and with a few more add-ons with the Euro E white paper, just a stablecoin white paper that if you explore the white paper, you will see that the properties of the white paper are inspectable. You see how the screen is responding to my clicks at the moment. So, and of course, this is something that we are going to be coming back to, the issue of responsiveness and what leads to that. But what I want you to take away from all of this is that these white papers are not based on the applicable taxonomy. So please don't just take an older white paper that has already been published for a while, duplicate it, and start editing the content, because the white paper itself may have violations or may be based in entirely the wrong taxonomy. At the moment, we have a new taxonomy that can be found in the ESMA website, the MiCA White Paper Taxonomy 2025. This is the package that we need to use to prepare the MiCA white papers. You will find here a main document, which is the MiCA taxonomy in itself. You will also find an explanation of the documentation, validation rules, and we are going to come back about how to validate a white paper closer to the end of this webinar, and also a reporting manual. Very important to use the reporting manual, because not many of the white papers that we are seeing at the moment beginning to circulate in XBRL format have been done implementing the taxonomy, but not implementing the manual. And in the manual, you will find a number of recommendations that are quite important. But let me take a break at this point and invite my co-host in this webinar, Aayush Ladda, who is the Senior Business Analyst at the MiCA Crypto Alliance. And he's going to help us explore the taxonomy in itself. So, Aayush.
Yeah, thank you so much for the introduction, Juan. So let me take it ahead from here. Thank you for mentioning the taxonomy, which was released here in 2025. Now I'll walk you through the three important parts. That is the documentation for the MiCA taxonomy that ESMA has published. I'll start with the taxonomy documentation. This definitely defines all the structure and all the requirements and all the details of the taxonomy. But the most important thing that I would want your attention on is this diagram, which defines what are all parts of definition tables, what are external taxonomies that are being called, and all those things. So the green box that you see here on the right side of my screen is entirely for the MiCA taxonomy, and the parts on the left are the ones which are external taxonomy, which are referenced by the ESMA taxonomy. So MiCA all would be your entry point to the taxonomy, and MiCA entry table defines all the structures uh, for the definition, the sequence that you follow for a white paper, and all those things. So the core schema of the taxonomy is what defines all the disclosure template, the modules that it refers to. Then we have the definition link base, which is this table over here. That would define the structural relationship between those multiple tables, and the classification of abstract versus concrete concepts here. So this is very essential on how you organize those concepts in the flow of your white paper. Then we have multiple link bases. As we all know that the white papers can be in multiple languages. It has to be in the language of the host nation where the white paper is being submitted. But also it is prescribed that you follow a language which is acceptable in the financial domain, which would be mostly English. And also there might be need of having white paper in multiple languages as well, depending on which nation you want your asset to be listed in. So once you enter the taxonomy, all this schema is defined, the contents of the table is defined. Then comes the presentation and the formulas for each of the taxonomies. So all of this put together and linked together would give you a final MiCA taxonomy table. And then this MiCA taxonomy, as I mentioned, calls external taxonomies. There are 4 types of taxonomies that MiCA taxonomy refers to. First one is the currency, that defines all your ISO standards for currency symbols and all those things. We have a country database. So there are fields in the white paper which has to be country. So you will have to make sure that this comes from the country taxonomy and follows all the standards on how you define a country using a two symbol or 2 character or a 3 character ISO standard for this one. Then it also calls the legal entity identifier database, which checks all the legal entity identifier for their validity. So a white paper with a wrong legal entity identifier would give an error at the validation. So it has to be made sure that the legal identity, the LEI is correctly placed in the white paper. Then it calls a directory called as the DTR. So DTR is basically defines all the data type requirements and the data type standards in the ESMA. In the ESMA white papers, also financial regulations. So all these standard units are all set here in this taxonomy, which MiCA taxonomy refers to. And then you can find all the details about what each type of element represents in this document. We would definitely suggest you to go through this, understand all the things in this document would be very helpful in understanding how to implement the taxonomy. The next one, I would go to the validation rules. So validation rules, it is an Excel sheet published by ESMA. This defines around 460 validation checks that a white paper would go through. This is combined for all three types of white papers, which is asset reference tokens, e-money tokens, and the others category. That is about, so we have approximately 160 checks for each type of white paper. So this Excel sheet defines all the types of validation rules that we have. On a very high level, we have three types of validation checks. First one is existence, which is it checks if the required data is in place or not. And that is simple. It is just like a presence or not presence. But the second one, the most important one, is the assertion checks. So assertion checks includes all the conditional checks that a white paper would go through. For example, if a field A2 is applicable and it wants that A3 should be defined when A2 is true, all these type of tree level and children level checks would go through these validation rules. So it is very important that all the white papers that are generated has to be checked for these validation rules. Failing to comply with these would lead to a violation of the regulation. And the third one is LEI validation. That is very simple. It checks the LEI database for a valid legal entity identifier. So the most important one to focus here is the assertion checks. It has multiple conditions. Of 160, about 70 to 80% of them are assertion checks only. The third one, let me go through the reporting manual. This is definitely a document that I would recommend you to go through as well. This defines all the standards that ESMA wants the white paper submission to follow. This also has regulations on requirements of how a white paper should be, the type of document, the type of file it should follow. Let me jump to the most important part here. So this, you will find all the guidelines here, but the most important ones are what restrictions are put on a white paper submission and what expectations does ESMA have when we are submitting a white paper. First one, the most important one is a use of hidden context references. So there are cases where a machine readable format expects a different value, but the implementation regulation needs the value to be displayed in another format. And that's when hidden concepts are used. And it is very important to make sure that hidden tags are used with utmost care, because adding hidden tag to a concept which does not want it to be there will raise validation errors and cause non-compliant issues as well. The next one would be the use of HTML. So the main HTML file has to be a XHTML inline XBRL file. The file should not call any external codes and any callable or executable codes which are called from any external sources or even from the same folder. Uh, if if we have those, it will raise a violation error which would give a violation error of executable code present. The next one is use of assets like images, fonts, and all those things in a white paper. ESMA clearly mentioned that it has to be encoded using the base 64 encoding in the white paper, and the correct MIME type has to be specified for the white paper. So as mentioned, everything goes in one single HTML file. It cannot be called from external folders or any other internet sources as well. So this is all the things that we need to take care of when preparing the white paper, following the formats, required formats, and all those things. But I think I have covered most of the important ones, but I would definitely recommend you to go through the submission manual. It would be very helpful for understanding how that would go. Now, let me jump through on our response to ESMA on the previous taxonomy that was released, and also the version of tool that was previously shared with us for a review as the MiCA Crypto Alliance and few other members. We raised some issues with the taxonomy as well as the tool where there are issues in how the units are used, or checking the standards on how the fields are defined and all those things. Uh, a lot of those issues have been fixed, but some issues still persist. The most important ones are conditional checks. Let me jump to the tool to show you an example of this one. So for example, the field 05 of the OTH category of white paper, initially it did not have a drop-down option and it had a fixed statement, and few types of white papers need this statement to be not applicable. So these kind of checks were lacking in the taxonomy in the previous version, in the tool in the previous version, but ESMA has taken these feedbacks into consideration and they have worked on it and implemented them successfully. But the only error which still exists is the conditional check. For example, the statement 09 here is not applicable when this statement is true. But the taxonomy still doesn't check that. Failing to put a correct text string here would lead to a validation error. And this is just explaining one of these issues. There are similar conditional level checks which we do still find errors with. One more issue which I want to point out is in the sustainability section. So as we all know, if the energy consumption of a token or an asset is more than 500,000 kilowatt hour, the supplementary indicators in the white paper becomes mandatory indicators. But the taxonomy level checks and the validation of the document does not actually take this into consideration. It does not checks if energy is more than 500,000, which would in turn make the supplementary indicators mandatory. So failing these kinds of a white paper with energy more than 500,000 kilowatt hour, but lacking supplementary indicators will go through the validation, but that would make the white paper non-compliant because you are not covering all the mandatory indicators in the tool. So these kind of issues are still persisting in the taxonomy, and you should treat them with utmost care when creating a white paper.
All right. So thank you very much, Aayush. And let me take a step back to put everyone on the same page about this, right? So for those of you who may be newer to the white paper world, please understand that there's a difference between the taxonomy, the XBRL implementation work package of ESMA and components of this work package, including the XBRL taxonomy, the XBRL reporting manual, and additional tools that ESMA makes available for us to use. And also, if we can share my screen for a second, Aayush was mentioning that what you see on screen right now, this is a report that you can find in our website as well. We will be able to share the links of all of this with you, but you can also easily find this in our website, in our reports section, with the feedback that we had provided to ESMA, which is what Aayush was sharing on screen a moment ago. Now, ESMA reached out a number of months ago to a number of industry associations, including ADEN, Blockchain for Europe, CCI, EMA, UCI, European Blockchain Association, and ourselves. We are the only white paper specialist group to have been reached out by ESMA on this, and we heavily contributed on the feedback that they were requiring. Now, this feedback that ESMA was inviting was mostly feedback on the tool that they were making available, even though they were not accepting any liability for this. We provided feedback that went beyond just the tool. Because one of the issues that we discover as we are advancing through the review of ESMA's work is that the taxonomy and the regulatory technical standards or the implementing technical standards are not aligned. So the ESMA taxonomy basically gives you a white paper template. Now, the taxonomy is really messy, right? So it's not like you open the document and you find a white paper template there ready to use, but you have the components for a template. And you also find a template in the regulatory technical standards in the Commission Implementing Regulation 2984 of the year 2024. These two templates should be aligned. One should be the human readable version, the other should be the machine readable version, and they should have the same content. This content is not, however, aligned perfectly. And there are a number of instances where we find exactly that problem. So sometimes, to make it very simple, where the RTS, they expect text, the taxonomy expects a number, and text and numbers are not the same, right? Or where the taxonomy expects a true or false value, the regulatory technical standards expect a predefined alphanumerical text, that is a mandatory couple of sentences. A mandatory couple of sentences as an alphanumerical string, that cannot be a true or false thing, right? So you basically have a human readable version and a machine readable version of the same document that are not the same. They do not reflect the same underlying data. So of course there are ways around it, but at the bottom, at the core, this is a problem of the implementation package, right? The misalignment was not supposed to happen. In addition to that, the tooling in itself produced by ESMA had some limitations, right? It's an Excel tool, it had limited capabilities, but overall it helped you get started with the white paper. We provided feedback on all of this, feedback on the taxonomy, feedback on the tooling itself, and you can find a list of errors that we had identified back then, probably not encompassing of everything we have identified since, but a good number of these errors, like Aayush was saying, have been sorted out. Not all of them, right? And Aayush was showing some of the examples that have not yet been sorted out. This means that if you use this ESMA tool, you will still not get a valid white paper, even from the perspective of ESMA's own taxonomy rules. But in addition to that, even if you sorted out those issues, basically you do the post-production efforts after using the tool, you still have a problem of misalignment. That is, if you want to comply with the taxonomy, you need to violate the RTS. If you want to comply with the RTS, you need to violate the taxonomy sometimes, in some small instances. There are ways of dealing with this, but this is a problem that, however, has not been sorted out at all. So in addition to everything I just mentioned, we also have that fundamental misalignment of the two. Eventually, there might be, I hope, an update of the taxonomy. But as I was saying, there are ways of dealing with it and basically dissociate the human and the machine readable version. So the advice in this case is use both. Do not mindlessly implement the taxonomy only without looking at the regulatory technical standards, because that can leave you with a white paper that complies with the validation rules, but does not comply with the implementing regulations. And you need to comply with both. Also, a note from a more admin perspective to everyone attending this webinar. Really happy to see how much attendance we're having and all the questions that we are receiving. We do see the questions that you're sending. We are going to try to answer these questions at the end of the webinar in a Q&A space. We also try to make this available later on via our YouTube channel as well. So I am responding to this question in advance, but do not worry. What I will say is that we may have a 30-second delay between a question being asked and we being able to see it, even if we are seeing. So just have a bit of patience until we receive your questions. Aayush, did we have to cover anything else on ESMA's consultation, or should we just jump ahead?
Yeah, we can jump ahead, I think, yes.
All right. So, of course, what you want to see is what a MiCA white paper looks like when we are using the XBRL format. So we are going to show you a number of examples. What I am showing on screen right now is a white paper we have produced. This is authorship of the MiCA Crypto Alliance, a white paper we have produced for HBAR. We already had an HBAR white paper in our website. This is a PDF white paper, however, and so now we're going to be releasing an XBRL white paper, in this case for HBAR, right? This is not a PDF, but if you browse through it, it really looks like a PDF. That is a look and feel sort of edit. It's part of the work that we have done to improve the human readable experience. A white paper does not need to look like this, but it is widely regarded as a best practice to do this sort of formatting efforts in a white paper so that it has a professional look and feel. These white papers, as you can see, like they're also cross-referenced and so on, and you can click on any section to explore it. For instance, we go now to section H, right? Information on the technology. So if you click on a field of the white paper, what you see in the right side of the screen is that the properties are inspectable. So everything that the human can read, the machine can also extract. And you have readily available access to the machine readable version of the human readable experience that you're receiving on the right side of the screen. This inspectability, this responsiveness of the white paper from this user experience point of view, it is also considered a best practices. So you see, as we are advancing through the white paper, what you see is that by clicking on different areas, the right side of the screen changes. This is particularly important, as Aayush was saying, for the properties in the sustainability section, right? So every field here, it will allow you to see also various versions, a finer exploration of all the data. For instance, also, if there are maximum number of digits that you can use to describe an energy consumption value, in the human readable version, the machine readable version will not have these sort of issues. Also importantly on this, we have the MiCA Crypto Alliance will work with optional and supplementary sustainability indicators as well, not just the mandatory ones. Again, part of our commitment to best practices. So you can also explore in these white papers how to do the XBRL formatting for those. And as I just mentioned here, as these are lesser used parts of the white papers, there may be problems with these as well. Now, if we try to do the same white paper using ESMA's tooling, obviously what you'll see is that the experience visually is also much different. There is no inspectability of any kind. The possibility to format, add even branding, images, graphs becomes much more restricted. Even just the fact of using bowling or tables within a document. So this is our a usage of the same, trying to put the same white paper in a different format. So it's a more limited tool, and unfortunately, it's not just limited from a visual point of view, but it has some problems. It will require post-production efforts, and we are going to be getting at that shortly at the validation section, which is, of course, one of the parts that you are probably looking forward to see, as you want to see exactly how to do how to validate a white paper. This that you see on screen right now, for instance, another type of white paper that has circulated to us, which is neither using, say, the standards that we use, but also not using ESMA's Excel tools. In this case, this is a static plain HTML, so it will result in a loss of functionality, and there are some practices that may be not the best with some more limited or antiquated tools, but you can achieve a compliant white paper, even if it's not top-notch, by relying on plainer and more simple techniques. However, what you're sacrificing here is basically the future proofing. Using best practices and leveraging best practices in white paper production, such as what is typically used in SEC filings, will typically put you in a better position for the future, as probably NCAs find their supervision work more complicated over time. The fact that you have produced a white paper relying on higher standards will allow you to navigate future requirements better, and we'll get onto specifics about that right now. But maybe, Aayush, we can do a deep dive right now in one of our own white papers, maybe another one, and yeah, let's show our audience how a best practice white paper looks like.
Yep. Thank you, Juan. So let me run through the BSV white paper, which is one of our submission-ready white papers, which is completely validated. Let me run you through this one. So the BSV white paper that you see here looks like a PDF, but as Juan mentioned previously, this is a XBRL tagged human readable version with inspectability of all the elements. The white paper that you see here, all the applicable elements in the white paper would be XBRL tagged. So let me turn on the XBRL elements that you see in this white paper. So section first one is where all the fields are applicable except I05, which we have tagged incorrectly. But you would find this when you move to the next parts, part A, B, C. So you will have to report all the fields and the section which is applicable specifically for your white paper. And while implementing that, you will need to have standards being followed and all those things. But let's say for this white paper, when we have reported the section A, each table, each part of the white paper are inspectable. You will get all the fact properties of the white paper. As you see, there will be a legal entity identifier linked to a white paper for its identity. If you also click on that, you will be able to verify that with the GLEIF data. And this is how it should actually be. And putting that everything wrapped up in a viewer would give this inspectability option to you. Having a plain XHTML static file would pass you through the validation, but will lack the facility and the capability of inspecting all the elements actually. Let me take you to part B and C, which is not applicable. Here you would see that all the fields that are not applicable are not XBRL tagged. And this still goes through validation because since a full part A is disclosed, the taxonomy knows that part B and C is not applicable. And we make sure that all of these standards are followed. There are specific fields like D5, which defines all the legal persons involved in the implementation of the assets. The taxonomy expects that to be a tree of multiple fields. So each field here, for example, if you see the name, has a different fact value and a concept linked to it. Similarly happens for the type of person. This fact value also has multiple data types. For example, the types of person here are based on enumeration data types, which is a fixed set of inputs that the taxonomy is expecting. So if you add anything else except what the taxonomy is expecting, it will give you a validation error, basically. So we have multiple fields in the white paper which follow this tree structure. But on a very high level, all these white papers should comply with the implementation regulation, talking about which it takes me to field E1, where the implementing regulation wants it in the human readable format to be ATTR for admission to trading. But the taxonomy for validation expects it to be admission to trading. And that's how we have dealt with the human readable format versus the machine readable format. It also follows the implementing regulation versus it also goes through all the validation checks that the white paper has to go through.
Allow me
Uh,
to interrupt here for a second, Ayush. I think this is super important, right? How you deal with these misalignments between the taxonomy on the RTS.
yeah,
And also something that you mentioned before, but I want to double click on it for a second, is the fact that you can have a non-compliant white paper even if you pass validation rule checks. And it was a D5 that you were showing a moment ago. There was this table, right? And the table has, for instance, the name of the person involved, but also the type of person and the address. So it is possible. I'm not sure if this is the best example, but if you have one of these in these tables, the tag is different for each one of the elements of the table. Now, if you, in a case such as this one, you would inadvertently invert one field with the
with
other, right? So you would tag, say, the name of the person as a type of person and the type as a name. Your white paper would still go through validation checks. Unless it's expecting a value that is not provided, but you still have a non-compliant white paper.
white paper.
So we are going to get into validation of white papers in a second, but keep in mind that just having a valid white paper from a validation check is not enough.
Right. So yeah, talking about these fields specifically, the fields that really need some care is enumeration and Boolean data types, which would uh, have all those edge cases scenarios where it could go through validation but not comply with the regulatory standards and all those things. Uh, Let me also run you through how validation works. The paper that I've showed you right now is in an XBRL version, inline XBRL version, which is in human readable format. But how would that go through a validation check? So we are using a tool called REL for this. Let me open the white paper which I just showed you, uh, and we load this on the tool. The first step it goes through is the taxonomy level checks. So looks like this shows that the paper has gone through the taxonomy level validation. It just gives one relation, one error, which is it's not an error. It says a statement that no relationship for calculations. That is because MiCA taxonomy has no relationship for calculations. This is more of a standard in financial reporting where calculations between, let's say, expenses, earnings, and all those things are calculated, but that is not present in MiCA. And once the white paper is loaded on REL, you can see that the contents of the white paper is now present in a tree structure on the tool. But this is still not validated. If we click on, if we need to check all the validation rules that I've previously shown to you, which is released by ESMA, we click on validating this with the taxonomy rules. It takes a few seconds and it will give a, yeah, it has completed the validation. Now let me give you an example of the same white paper which we have generated using the ESMA tool. Uh, I'll load the new white paper again, which was generated using the ESMA white paper tool. It is the same BSV white paper with all the same contents, but it checks on for the taxonomy check. But if I click on validate, uh, let us give out, yeah. So these are all the condition level check errors which I was talking about. So these are mostly dealing with not applicable fields and their presence actually. So once we would definitely suggest that you should always run your white papers through validation checks to check for any errors that you might have in the white paper before submitting it to the NCAs. Uh, that takes me to the best practices of the white paper. Uh, so with the submission manual that ESMA has given, it has a few suggestions which they have made and also some of the things which has to be mandatorily there. For example, you cannot have an external styling sheet. So all the styling that you see here on the viewer, they have to be embedded into one single HTML file. As I mentioned previously, the images, all the fonts, formattings, they have to be encoded and embedded into your HTML file. And not embedding them or calling it from an external source would lead to violations. The next one is the one that I mentioned about the enumeration data types. So fields like E1, they have to be correctly displayed in the human readable format, but also you have to make sure that the machine readable format is a correct fact value, which should go through the validation. The next one, it is a very important thing. Any types of numbers cannot have a hidden tag. So let us, this is mostly related to the sustainability section. Let's say you have a very high energy consumption, but you are tagging a value that is smaller, and under a hidden tag you are putting a correct value. That would like pass through validation, but it is a serious violation for the regulation. So that is why numbers or any fields related to number disclosure should never have a hidden tag in a white paper. Next one, I would suggest validation checks, very important. We would definitely suggest you to use some kind of tool. There are multiple tools which can load taxonomies and validate the white papers. So before you submit your white paper to the NCA, run it through validations, make sure all the validations are checked, and to make also to double make sure, you have to make sure that the display version, the human readable version, and the machine readable version both should comply with the regulations. Uh, I think that is it in terms of validation and the best practices that we should follow in a white paper. Uh, but feel free to reach out if you need any assistance with all of these things. Over to you, Han.
Thank you so much. I think this has been really great, right? We are seeing more and more, well, not more and more. We don't see that many examples of XBRL white papers already, but we are seeing a number of XBRL white papers already circulating. Some of them are really good, honest attempts at implementing XBRL, but it's clear that they have not been run through validation, which is a basic step that you need to do. Right. So one of the first things that we do is when we receive an XBRL white paper by somebody else, is we validate it. And to our surprise, we find that there are errors, right? And these errors are the same for everyone. It's not that depending on the tool that you use to validate, you would get one error or you would get another. The tools the tool is the taxonomy. The tools that you can use to load the taxonomy are very similar and equally valid. So please do validate your white papers. You're going to save yourselves a lot of trouble. As Aayush was mentioning, we had our own white paper run through the validation, and it did not trigger any validation rule violations. And then we used even ESMA's tool, and it did trigger a number of these violations, right? So be careful if you want to use ESMA's tools, because then you will need to manually one by one fix those errors. And that's still not leaving you with a compliant white paper. So even after a post-production effort to have the white paper be valid from the perspective of the taxonomy package, you still may have something that is not aligned with the RTS. And that brings me to also some alternative solutions you may find in the market. Generally, obviously XBRL is not a format that MiCA white papers invented. XBRL is a widely used financial reporting language, and is used in SEC filings quite a bit. We try to adapt our practices, of course, with the adaptations required by MiCA, but we try to adapt everything that we do to the best practices used in SEC filings, because typically they require the SEC much more advanced use of XBRL. So that also acts for us as a roadmap for which requirements may be coming through later on. And this has to do with, the more basic use of XBRL using in MiCA white papers might mean that the NCAs will have supervision problems. When they try to analyze and extract the data, they may end up creating their own rules for the submission, and therefore, even if we comply with MiCA basic requirements, we're still not complying with NCA requirements. To avoid all of that, it's a good idea to just try to adapt to the best standards used by the SEC in SEC filings. Now, in this case, however, you may be tempted to think, oh, well, why don't I just go to a provider that prepares annual financial reports, right? And you may find, some tools out there where you can buy a license to convert an existing annual report to iXBRL format. Now, be very careful with these because the tools are very good. However, in many of these cases, what you receive is a license to a tool. It does not actually convert your white paper. So then you need to use the license. Basically, you will need to drag across, you will need to decide yourself what tags to put in a white paper using somebody else's tool that might work well. But you need to make what are called taxonomy decisions. If you need to make taxonomy decisions, that is, you need to decide individually which tags to place. As good as the tool is, if you're not specialized in this, you might make some mistakes. Better in that case to go to an end-to-end solution. But in the cases of end-to-end solution, we really recommend go to a MiCA specialized end-to-end provider, because as we were saying, you may have a valid white paper from a taxonomy perspective that is in non-compliance from the perspective of the RTS. Finally, as Aayush was saying as well, right, it is very important if you're going to do this on your own, that you read the reporting manual. Don't just use the basic taxonomy. There's a lot of rules that you will not find if you are not reading the reporting manual. Some of the rules in the reporting manual are suggestions. I believe the usage of hidden facts versus concealed facts, for instance, is something dealt with at the suggestion level. However, some other requirements are not a suggestion. They are very much a requirement. As we were saying, you cannot have an external styling sheet, which is something that you might have in other kinds of XBRL. XBRL submissions for other contexts. So be careful with these things. So also just to then finally do a final recap, right? Obviously, if you don't want to do these yourselves and you'd like some support on this, please reach out, right? We are happy to also, we produce white papers ourselves, end-to-end ESG data included, as you know. We can also help you convert an existing white paper or update it, find the errors for the work that you have already done, and then convert it to the right format. I think maybe we can even get a QR code on the screen with a link to our website. So let's definitely get that. And alternatively, we'll leave this in the comments and in the YouTube channel. But I think we can get probably a QR code there. Oh, there it is. Then generally, I mean, we are of the strong opinion that it's very important to rely on best practices. You have seen, it's important that you see visually on your own the distinction between a well-produced white paper and a bare minimum white paper that is compliant, or also a white paper that is not even bare minimum and it's not compliant. That's why we have put some examples on screen of different levels of care. The white papers that we produce, as you can see, they're very nice visually. That, of course, goes a long way in just treating your readers correctly. They're also hosting ready, so you can put them on your website and they have this nice interactive functionalities while preserving the one file requirement and known and interactive code requirements of the reporting manual, so you don't need to worry about that. We're trying to use the functionalities that XBRL is meant to have. So what we're doing is using XBRL to its fullest possible extent, right? As you can see, the white papers that we have been sharing, we did not have to install any additional software, or we did not have to create our own code to extract the machine readable, say, experience and interactiveness from the white paper, because the viewer experience is already included in the main in the files. This is also important, from the perspective of the NCA. When the supervisory authorities, they start facing themselves lots and lots of white papers, they may start finding different practices in the white papers that have been submitted. Some of these practices could be, could trigger a manual review. The more manual reviews that there are, the more a sophisticated submission will make the job of the regulator easier. Then will reduce the need for manual reviews, could improve processing times, and also could leave you basically future-proofed for NCA-specific requirements, as the NCAs discover that they are finding it hard to extract information, to analyze it, because the usage of XBRL by some submissions has been a bit basic, right? So, there are some things we might probably not have the time to go through them all, but there's some key concepts that you need to also keep in mind, right? There's the granularity of the tagging, the depth of your usage of the taxonomy. So in the taxonomy, you might find level 1, level 2, and level 3 even concepts. Not a lot of them in MiCA, so not to worry about. But sometimes you can have a compliant white paper because you're using the higher levels and you're not using the lower levels. So you're doing what's called shallow tagging. If you do that, you may still have a compliant white paper, but it's much harder for the regulator to interpret what you've done. So this may lead to longer processing times, manual review, and possibly other rules. So it's generally important to have taxonomy depth, to use a lot of cross-references and correctly reference the IDs. So of course you can have a white paper that passes validation checks, but it's not doing a correct cross-referencing. This is basically very hard to analyze and to interpret. Like when you are faced from the perspective of the reader, of the reviewer of the white paper, you can struggle to understand what did the writer do. So the usage of these tags, the usage of proper anchors and consistent naming of the different tags, and correct me, Aayush, if I'm saying something precise here, is also very, very important. So of course, we are more than willing to help with this. And we can also take this burden off your hands if you're interested in that. So just please reach out. We are working with a large part of the industry already, and of course the XBRL requirements kicking in have meant that we have a lot of work these days. So that's why we also put out this webinars to make it easier for everyone. I don't know, Aayush, have I missed something on some of these differentiating factors?
No, I think you've pretty much covered it. And also, I would like to add more in terms of how we deal with our flow. We have a fully automated process so as to reduce any human intervention or manual errors that might be introduced in the process. So that way, reducing the possibilities of validation failures or non-compliance, we make sure and we are very careful with dealing all these things. Yeah, I think that's it.
Yes. Okay, then let's go to the Q&A, right? Thank you to all of you who have been participating with the comments via LinkedIn. So we have a number of them right now. Aayush, make sure you can read those too. And yeah, indeed. Okay, so we have a couple of questions about the deadline, right? What this statement to support the smooth implementation of the requirements of the white papers and format, what it says is that these requirements shall be in effect as of the 23rd of December. It does not make clear that this is effective for all white papers as of this date, or for all white papers submitted as of this date. What we did say in this webinar is that we are of the interpretation, and this is our interpretation, that white papers submitted before this deadline would not have to be retroactively reconverted. However, it's not a good practice, and an NCA may disagree. And if an NCA disagrees, then the NCA's interpretation triumphs for your particular circumstances. So if you're in the possibility of updating your white paper, you need to update your white paper regularly anyway. So why not do a proper white paper by the 23rd or as soon as you can thereafter is really a good practice. So we really recommend it, because it is true the language used could have been a bit clearer. I insist we try to also promote interpretations that are favorable to the industry and that not impose inordinate compliance burdens. We're trying to make compliance lighter and easier for the industry. So we also believe this is a kind of interpretation that would be more favorable for the industry. However, please take this into account, and the possibility that you need more. You need to reconvert everything by the 23rd. While not our interpretation, it cannot be excluded. We've also been asked if there will be so many questions of this. If there will be a copy of this recording, if we could get this. So yes, we are publishing this in our YouTube channel. It will also be available on LinkedIn, but I know most of you prefer YouTube because you can download the video, you can play it while you're going for a run or something and turn off the screen, and it's just easier to find. So it's definitely going to be put in our YouTube channel. I believe it has been shared in the LinkedIn comments in particular. So please find that. Yeah, we will try, and in response to other questions, we will also try to include the Q&A. I think that is likely to be possible. Also, what we are going to do is we're going to leave our social media in the screen. So in a few moments, you'll start seeing our social media details, and you can use that as well to contact us and to follow all of the content that you might need. We've been asked if we have a link to the BSV white paper. We don't have that to offer yet due to the publication window time. But please just wait, the statutory time for this, and you will be able to see this white paper very soon, as well as other white papers. I believe we may be able to put some of these white papers in our website in the case that are not submitted, therefore they don't go to the publication minimum restriction time. So we'll try to make that available for you as soon as possible, and otherwise you'll see it in the registry also as soon as possible. Careful, however, with white papers that you find in the registry, because you don't know when those white papers were submitted and what checks these white papers went through. So if you have the idea of, I will find a white paper that has already been published and try to work from it, in addition to, of course, any eventual copyright violations you may be incurring by touching somebody else's work, you may be working on a non-compliant document. The fact that it made it to the ESMA registry does not guarantee that it's a compliant document, so please be careful with those things. In the case of whether we use AI for the white papers, so for the XBRL, there's no usage of AI in this. This is a standard reporting language, so it's just not recommended to rely on AI, which is an imprecise, non-deterministic tool for a very, very deterministic format. We also have a question about, is it an obligation of the issuer, of the offerer, of the person drafting the white paper in the ESMA register to comply with the new format and not the CASPs, and ask if we would agree. So the obligation is on the person preparing the white paper. Basically, the white paper preparer, that's a term that we use actually for the submitter. So really the person submitting the white paper and typically adopting the role of person seeking admission to trading, or the offerer, or there is a legal debate right now on whether a CASP admitting an asset to trading is a person seeking admission to trading, or if it's something else. But in that case, the CASP, whatever the person is, if they are submitting the white paper, they would need the XBRL formatting. So it is really, obviously, I do understand the perspective. I assume this comes from a CASP, the question, and I do understand that CASPs now listing hundreds of crypto assets per year feel that the compliance burden of doing the XBRL requirement may be a bit too high if it's their problem and not the problem of the project. But I believe the answer to this is more is just the same answer that you get for the white papers in general. So who needs to prepare the white paper, or who needs to submit a modification submission in case of a white paper modification? Nobody's forcing basically a crypto asset service provider, but specifically a trading platform, to admit a crypto asset to trading. So it's then between the crypto asset trading platform and the project team to decide who is submitting the white paper to the NCS. If there is not I could say a cooperative project, but the trading platform really wants to list the white paper, then unfortunately it is on the trading platform, therefore on the CASP side, to have this requirement to convert the white paper in XBRL. We see also some questions, so I'm trying to follow. There's so many questions, and this is great that we get so much participation. There's been an attempt to submit XBRL to an NCA together with the PDF version, and they said that they were not accepting at this time. That's unfortunate. Obviously, a number of NCAs are accepting XBRL, but I don't think they have the process to review it. So they may be accepting the white papers as a standard document that could be invalid just because that's the format that you used. And it may be the case that, the NCA just find it easier. If you're offering them the option of here's a PDF version, they're just going to be taking the PDF version. Definitely, there are some NCAs that are already taking XBRL submissions, but we should check if they are validating and they have proper submission tools. I'm not sure. I see a question there about a token generation event listing in Europe with a 20-day notification lag. I'm not sure I understand the question, so feel free to rephrase that question. And we may have skipped a question, actually, also by PW. In cases where a field on iXBRL input is required taxonomy field, but there is no information available to the drafter, in the human readable version, you can state that this information is not available at the time of writing the white paper or something similar. But unfortunately, this is not valid, not allowed with the validations on the iXBRL doc. So how can you leave these fields, can you leave this field blank? So Aayush, this is a great question for you to elaborate. Basically, what happens, for instance, if you have a white paper where you need to put, say, a numerical value, but you don't have that value? So there's a distinction between, you mentioned this before actually, a field not being applicable by necessity and a field not being applicable in the specific circumstances of the case. So maybe you can
Right. So specifically in the field which expects number, there is no way around. I think ESMA should find a solution to this one. But right now, what we would suggest is adding a 0 for the numerical field. But for a text field, there is an option around. You will need to give a description on why that field is not applicable. And I think that should go through the validation checks and also be compliant.
This is also reminding me that we've seen some white papers circulating that I believe in some cases, especially of these mismatches between the RTS and the taxonomy, are just defaulting all of the machine readable values to true, which is not what we would do.
Right.
Yes.
Yes. So in terms of those statements, specifically, this happens when there are the predefined statements that has to be there. So we would suggest to add this text field in the human readable format and tag it correctly either to a true or a false if applicable or not. So there should be a clear differentiation between tagging a Boolean value and having a text field for that. Because if you put a Boolean value that is not complying with the regulatory standards, it might get validated, but there is a clear requirement to have this separated in terms of human readable and machine readable formats.
Perfect. Thank you very much. And then we're taking our final question of the afternoon. Thank you for bearing with us with such a long webinar. It's a very extensive topic, so I hope this has been helpful. The final question is a rephrasing of the previous one, right? And it's asking, it's actually not a question on XBRL, so we have to make it quick and cut it here. But it's basically asking a CASP, are they not able to list newly created tokens, newly launched tokens, because they need to wait at least the 20 working days before admitting to trading? So first of all, of course, let's keep in mind that not all CASPs are catapus, right? Trading platforms. Trading platforms specifically are the ones that have admission to trading restrictions. They can list an asset that is newly created if the white paper has been submitted and notified 20 working days in advance of the launch of the token. This is what MiCA is expecting. However, yes, I would say that the white paper, in the case of not existing, not having been notified, and you want to admit the asset to trading immediately without trying to skip the 20 working day period, unfortunately, there is no way around it. You do have to wait those 20 working days. It's a requirement. But happy to dive on the specifics. Please reach out. I don't know if we have a carousel with a social media. Thank you for everyone submitting questions. We need to cut it here. Again, there's a link on that side of the screen. You can scan the QR code. You can visit the MiCA Crypto Alliance website. You'll find the contact details. If you need help with your white papers, your sustainability data, or any of the other interesting areas of work that we're doing at the MiCA Crypto Alliance to support best practices in the field, please reach out, and let's see you on the next webinar of the Alliance. Thank you for being here, and appreciate your time.
Thank you so much, everyone. Thank you.